Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldron. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, August 30th, 2019. I guess this will be our last August show for 2019. I mean, that shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, it being August 30th and all, but that's where we stand. And, of course, it occurs to me, today being Friday, we won't have, I mean, unless he decides to come by, I suppose I'll always open the door for him, but Greg Dworkin would ordinarily be on the air saying, hey, are we going to do a show Monday? Because Labor Day, am I right? Is Labor Day happening? Is that, I think that's why the kids are off from school today. We get lucky, they get a 4-day weekend out of this. Woo! What luck. Well, that'll pose a challenge, even if we decide now to, I don't know what we're going to do on Monday. I mean, we'll be off, so we could do a show, but then we're not off, are we? And are we really, truly honoring our labor heritage if I have to sit at the microphone? It's not exactly labor. Could I record a show ahead of time? I don't know. I'll plan it out on the air. We'll see whether we have enough quiet time today. And I don't know. We'll see what happens, I guess. I should just rely on the president's line, which I just finally dawned on me today, that we'll see what happens is his also carried over from Sarah Palin's. That would be the analogy. We'll see what happens is to Donald Trump as also was to Sarah Palin. It's just sort of a verbal crutch that they both fall back on. And I put that out this morning. It did strike me that way. And yeah, that's the correct tense, as also was to Sarah Palin. She's still alive. She just doesn't matter anymore, thankfully. So I don't know. I suppose maybe that's hopeful. I'm just sort of thinking, like, a lot of people are wondering, will we ever be able to repair the damage that Donald Trump did to our country? Will we ever be able to put him behind us? And I guess, well, Sarah Palin didn't actually have a chance to do serious damage to the country. And we have been able to put her behind us, but it's a totally different situation. Someone who lost for vice president versus someone who was president, or claimed to be president, and we all treated as president for at least 4 years. Hopefully not much more than that, or any more than that, or hopefully less than that. If we can't, we don't necessarily have to count on him finishing his term in office either. All right. So where are we today? Daily Coast Radio is live now. Thanks, Bill, for letting me know. Today, Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, plays all your favorite Labor Day carols. See, okay, we do have it right. Like it's beginning to look a lot like Labor Day, which that would not only be a mouthful, but what would we say? Oh, well, you know, it's not really all that hot, but it's still summer. There's not a lot to say about it's beginning to look a lot like Labor Day. And, though, Grandma got run over by a Teamster, which everybody should be able to sing along with. That's a good one. Well, yeah, there's no Labor Day decorations or anything like that in the stores where we could all complain that it's Memorial Day and you're already putting out the Labor Day decorations and the Labor Day candy. But it does has a certain finality to it. The pools in the area, we're lucky enough to have some pools, thanks to the fantastic Homeowners Association that everybody loves to join. And, you know, you have to. So very nice. I live in a very nice area. I'm lucky to have that. And every year we lament not having gone to the pool that we've been paying for. But that's our own fault. We're staying in and producing podcasts. But it reminds us how sad it is that the summer is over and it's only going to be 90 degrees for another 6 to 8 weeks. Oh, well, we still live in a swamp. Anyway, plenty to catch up on. It's Friday. That gives us a chance to read all sorts of crazy stories that have not been reported on the show in the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But, yeah, there are some new developments, things we ought to touch on or at least mention even if we don't read the full story. I'm not sure what the implications are of this one yet, but many of the news dailies, and there are several, have stories on this one. Not sure exactly what it means, but it's probably not good. Trump's executive assistant resigns from the White House. That's the way Politico put it, but it sounds like she was forced to resign, fired. Nancy Cook, the reporter for Politico, has this piece. I don't know who this person is, but I'm not a White House insider, but it doesn't sound very good. President Donald Trump's longtime executive assistant, Madeleine Westerhout, abruptly resigned from the White House on Thursday after coming under scrutiny for sharing intimate details about the president's family with reporters, according to two sources familiar with the move. The move is you're fired, although in all likelihood, he didn't fire her. He sent someone else to do it. As you know, he has in real life, he has a problem with confronting and firing people. The piece is illustrated by a photo of this Madeleine Westerhout with, that's Sarah Sanders, I think. The two of them are carrying bottles of water somewhere in the White House compound because their jobs are extremely important. And I guess the dude bros in the White House make sure that the women, even when they're press secretaries, get sent to get bottled water. Anyway, neither of them, looking important and fantastic in this picture, but I'm sure they could have picked a better one. I read, I think, in the Hills version of this story at first that I don't know if I would call her a long-time executive assistant. I guess she'd been his personal assistant since he came to the White House. But it's not a long relationship since before that, at least not according to that story. Let's see what else we have here. In the past 6 months, Westerhout had tried to expand the boundaries of her job to encompass a broader set of tasks and to include foreign travel, said one advisor close to the White House, who suggested Westerhout had tried to act like a de facto chief of staff. And she's ambitious, and they were making her carry water, so I can understand why she wanted a broader portfolio. Although I don't know if chief of staff would have been the right choice. So it sounds like maybe they were out to get her. So they resented her for whatever reason, and maybe are inflating her ambitions, but maybe not. The White House, as you may have noticed, is full of crazy people. Anyway, this irked several White House officials and cabinet secretaries who thought she should stick to her primary task of serving as the president's personal secretary with the desk just outside the Oval Office. Westerhout didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. The New York Times first reported her departure. By the way, I mean, it's not a crazy thing, right, to think you're the executive assistant, the personal assistant, I guess, to the president. You sit just outside the White House. You're a personal gatekeeper of sorts. You deal with him all the time. I mean, isn't his current social media guy who travels with the president and is in the residence all the time and goes on all the overseas trips and is considered a very high-ranking official, unlike in any other White House? Not that many White Houses exist where they had a social media director. That's true, to be fair. But the guy who handles the president's Twitter account is not supposed to be in international meetings with leaders, but is these days. But didn't he used to be Trump's golf caddy? So, I mean, she's not out of her mind here to say, I could move up from personal assistant to something important. That's the Trump organization and the Trump administration, are full of people who came in as low-level nobodies and ingratiated themselves and moved up to high-ranking positions. That's my understanding. So why can't it happen for her? Because she's a girl, I guess. I don't know. I'm not really sure what it was. She just didn't have the right allies. Westerhout didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. The New York Times first reported her departure. Oh, I should have gone there then. What am I doing here at Politico? These Johnny come lately. These Johnnies? Are they Johnnies come lately? Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, the White House was buzzing for most of the day on Thursday. Did you know that? About her potential departure, especially after officials learned that she had attended an off-the-record dinner with reporters in Bedminster, New Jersey, the golf course, where she was said to have shared overly personal details about the president's life. She told the pull my finger story, I think. The close White House advisor called this, quote, the final straw. That's right. For someone who did not have many allies left in the building. Got to be careful about that. Many Trump 2016 campaign officials had always been wary of Westerhout, who joined the Trump transition from the Republican National Committee and was not an original Trump loyalist, which is really who you should be worried about. Okay, so there you have it. That's of interest, and now you know about it, and I didn't know about it before. That means you didn't know about it either. I don't know. You probably did know. You read the newspaper, but I the way the show works, I think something's going to happen with her, and now she's on the record, right? She's on our radar, and we can say, aha, I knew something was going to happen with that. In case you didn't know about who she was, rather than read about her when she, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be a murder spree per se, but whatever it is that she finally breaks back into the news for, or even if it's something, innocuous, we'll have this on the record. All right. So now that we're aware of that, we can move on to some of the other important things. So some other things that we didn't know. As a matter of fact, let me turn now to a tweet from, do you all remember Paige Vanderlinden, Plutonium Paige? Some of you who are long time readers of Daily Kos and other of the early days blogs remember Plutonium Paige. And she's been considerably less active on the blogging side lately, as we all have, really, honestly. But one of the olden days Daily Kos originals, and also with us, Greg and me, and all sorts of people who also went on to do great things all over the blogosphere, including Daily Kos at the Next Hurrah. Remember that one? That was sort of a fun side project for a lot of us, and or our first blogging purchase for a lot of us, and Paige was with us there. Anyway, hi Paige, how are you? I believe she's in Seattle now, according to what I was able to glean from her Twitter page. Anyway, she says, if you guys don't know anything about Poland's current politics, and I don't think I do, you'd better learn. Why Poland? Don't forget Poland. Poland is where Donald Trump is not going this weekend. That's part of the upcoming discussion. Mike Pence is going in his stead, and nobody could possibly be excited about that. But why is it important to go to Poland at all for the Trump administration? And what is likely to happen there now that the spotlight won't be so strongly on it? And maybe it should be on it because, as she says, if you don't know anything about Poland's current politics, you better learn. They're anti-EU. Where is that a problem? Anti-Semitic, anti-gay, just plain awful. You can Google, but here are two links to read. And one is to rainboweurope.org. That's rainbow-europe.org for internet URL purposes. And I'm sure they just don't have any punctuation at all between the two words out in the real world. And this page is offered up by way of support for the claim that they're anti-gay. And this is a long list of various strikes and tick marks against Poland in that score. They have an overall score on achieved LGBTI human rights, and that is an 18% score. Just to give you, whatever the metrics are that they offer you here. Its place among the 49 European countries, I guess, in LGBTI. That's a relatively new one on me, but I don't keep up on. I feel like I make it a point not to be too up to date on what the acronym is beyond the LGBT, because it seems to keep changing on me. So why commit it to memory? Then it was Q for a while, right? And now it's I. Well, anyway, its place among the European countries, 49 European countries, is 39th out of 49. It's not very good. Various metrics offered up here, but let me use the other article she includes here. Time magazine has a piece that reminds us that Poland just passed a Holocaust bill that is causing outrage. Here's what you need to know. First of all, the thing you need to know is that this article is from February of 2018, so it's been some time since Poland passed this outrageous bill. But that's what the headline says. Now I've explained it. Tara John is the writer on this piece for Time. Let's go let's get right to it. Poland's Senate passed a controversial bill on Thursday that outlaws blaming Poland, and you should, for any crimes committed during the Holocaust, which means they did them and don't want to be blamed for them. And that's history, so you all know about that. The bill was proposed by the country's ruling Law and Justice Party, which is apparently, I guess, in Polish, abbreviated in an acronym of PIS, capital P, lowercase I, S. No comment on how that might be pronounced. And calls for up to 3 years in prison or a fine for accusing the Polish state or people of involvement or responsibility for involvement in or responsibility for the Nazi occupation during World War II. Well, okay. I don't think the Polish people were necessarily responsible for the Nazi occupation. But anyway, the proposed legislation has raised concerns among critics about how the Polish state will decide what it considers to be facts. That doesn't sound good. Lawmakers in Israel have pointed to historical records citing complicity by some Poles in the activities of the Nazi regime. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, what does he know about this stuff, called it an attempt to rewrite history. I hope no one tries to do that. Early Thursday morning, senators voted 57-23 for the bill with 2 abstentions. The proposal requires approval by President, I'm going to guess it's Andrzej, it's A-N-D-R, oh my gosh, Polish, A-N-D-R-Z-E-J, Andrzej, I think it's just, we'll go with Andre. That sounds pretty Euro. Duda, I guess, D-U-D-A. I don't know how he pronounces it. Don't know my Polish. Probably got to get it right now that the visit is going on. Anyway, it requires the approval of the president, who supports it, to become law, so I guess it did. We have to send a clear signal to the world that we won't allow for Poland to continue being insulted. Patrick Jaki, J-A-K-I, Jaki, the Deputy Justice Minister told reporters in Parliament. What exactly would the law make illegal in Poland? That's the question that the next section poses. The answer is the legislation criminalizes any mention of Poles being responsible or complicit in the Nazi crimes. That's the important part. Committed by the Third German Reich. The harshest penalties are reserved for those who refer to Nazi-era concentration camps, oh no, such as Auschwitz as Polish death camps. They want you to get the ethnicity right on it. And okay, I think I don't know if I would put people in jail for it, but okay, they are Nazi death camps. They were located in Poland. Anyway, only scientific research into the war and artistic work are exempted. So if you say Polish death camps, you have to say, that's art, or else you'll go to jail. The use of the term Polish death camp. Wow. And I wish there was a death camp for the frogs in my throat. I can't get rid of these things. The use of the term Polish death camp has riled both the current nationalist government, look out for them, and its more liberal predecessors. I can see why they'd be upset. According to Polish politician Jan Grabiec, I have no idea how he would pronounce it. It's Grabiec. The Polish Foreign Ministry issued 913 statements between 2008 and 2015 in response to the term being mentioned. Well, they do have to keep an eye on things, I guess. They know better than I do how often that happens. Former U.S. President Barack Obama caused an uproar in Poland when he used the phrase Polish death camp, while posthumously bestowing a Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2012 to Jan Karski, a Polish World War II resistance fighter. Obama apologized for using the phrase after being denounced by current European Council President Donald Tusk, who was then the Prime Minister of Poland. Is that right? The Prime Minister of Poland's name, that's it? Donald Tusk? Does he say Tusk by any chance? There's no strange-looking characters or out-of-place consonants or anything. All right, well, I am just going by stereotypes. And why would the Polish be upset about that, right? Poor Poland. Anyway, why has the proposed law become a diplomatic incident? The bill sparked outrage in Israel after it passed through Poland's parliament on January 26th. That would have been January 2018, once again, on the eve of Holocaust Remembrance Day. Many in Israel call it an attempt to whitewash the role some Poles had in the detention and killing of around 3 million Polish Jews during World War II. It's a big deal. The legislation will not help further the exposure of historical truth and may harm freedom of research, as well as prevent discussion of the historical message and legacy of World War II, Israel's foreign ministry said in a statement. The bill was passed despite assurances from Poland that there would be a dialogue with Israel before the vote took place. I guess they didn't have that. The U.S. State Department also warned Polish lawmakers against passing the bill, saying it could have repercussion, just one repercussion. There's no plural here. It could have repercussion on the country's strategic interests and relationships, including with the United States. Well, what does the historical record say, in case you haven't read it yet? Poland was attacked and occupied in 1939 by Nazi Germany, which led to the building of concentration camps, including Treblinka and Auschwitz, that were operated by the Germans. I mean, that is true. The Germans killed about 1.9 million non-Jewish civilians and about 3 million Jews during the occupation of Poland, according to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. A number of Poles risked their lives to help hide Jews, according to the Polin, P-O-L-I-N, Museum of the History of Polish Jews. But, like certain citizens of other nations occupied by Nazi Germany, some Poles were complicit in the Nazi atrocities. Some people here in this country would have been complicit in Nazi atrocities, and some of them are right now. According to the Polin Museum, and that's all caps like it's a acronym, P-O-L-I-N. I don't know what that stands for. It's new to me. But according to the Polin Museum, a small minority of Poles either extorted money from Jews hiding from the Germans or outed them. The Nazis also recruited local collaborators to round up Jews for the camps. In addition, there were anti-Semitic pogroms during and after the war. The most infamous happened in 1941 in the town of Jidwa. No idea. And my own knowledge of the history of World War II in Poland doesn't help me with this one either. Jedwabne. It's how would you pronounce it? Jedwabne, in which 400 Jews were set on fire in a barn by their neighbors. How pleasant. The Polish Prime Minister tweeted a metaphor. Oh, this doesn't sound like it's going to be good. Intended to put these activities in context. Morawiecki, M-O-R-A-W-I-E-C-K-I. Is that the Polish Prime Minister at the time? Morawiecki? I have no idea. I'm not up on my Polish politics, I guess. Thanks to Paige for at least giving me this, even though it got me in trouble with pronunciation. I should have seen her coming off the bat. Well, she has this very important article for you to read. Go read it, because I can't. That's what I should have said. Anyway, the metaphor is a gang of professional thugs enters a two-family house. They kill the first family almost entirely. They kill the parents of the second, torturing the kids. This is fun. They loot and raze the house. Could one, in good conscience, say that the second family is guilty for the murder of the first? If only that were the exact analogy. Okay, well, why is Poland doing this now? That is a good question. Critics have accused the right-wing government of using the issue to bolster political support. PIS has been accused of pandering to nationalists, can you believe it? And the far right, through xenophobic language and tailoring its message to appeal to a spectrum of right-wing voters. Why would that happen? Their leader, Yaroslav Kaczynski, that's my best guess, once said Muslim refugees carried, quote, various parasites and protozoa. Well, he's up on protozoa. Anyway, who else said that? Oh, Donald Trump says things like that. And the government's education minister in 2016 discounted 2 well-documented massacres of Jews, including the aforementioned murder of the 400 in the barn, by calling it a matter of opinion, according to the Times of Israel. So, it ain't great. There's been a resurgence of far-right sentiment in the country. A Polish government pollster, say that one, Say it once fast. That's enough for me. A Polish government pollster found in a November survey that more than 1 in 3 polls. More than 1 in 3 polls polled. They don't say that. They just say 1 in 3 polled said they supported far-right activities. That same month, far-right nationalists marched in Warsaw, brandishing slogans and signs that said, "Clean blood, white Europe, and Europe will be white." How pleasant. Nothing bad can come of this. Foreign Minister Witold Waszkowski, maybe, said the march was, well, there's a typo in here. It says the march was fueled by patriotic behavior of Poles, and displays of xenophobia were incidents that were, of course, reprehensible. By the way, the typo is that it says that the foreign minister said the march was fueled by patriotic behavior. I'm fairly certain that isn't correct. However, if true, it's very troubling. Anyway, let's finish this up and then take a break here. The government denies that the bill was intended to limit free expression or rewrite history, because they love freedom of speech, as you know. But critics say otherwise. Yad Vashem, of which I have heard, of course, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center in Israel, agreed that the term Polish death camps was a historical misrepresentation in a statement last month. So that's interesting. However, restrictions on statements by scholars and others regarding the Polish people's direct or indirect complicity with the crimes committed on their land during the Holocaust are a serious distortion, the statement said. Well, Mike Pence is visiting the home of the serious distortion in place of Donald Trump, who has, I guess, is staying home to monitor the hurricane, ostensibly because it is aimed directly for Pervalago and his other Florida properties, although I think he thinks that's exciting. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. And, all right, so far, so good, I guess. All right, so we can move on from the Poland story. Not necessarily top of the news for everybody, but I thought a good thing to fill in with on a Friday. As I said, Trump not going to Poland. I guess the story is that he wants to stay home and monitor the hurricane situation. A lot of people pointing out that the hurricane appears to be headed straight for Florida. And in Trump world, that means for most of us that it's headed, it's headed straight for Mar-a-Lago and for his other Florida properties. And he's got several, and it's of some interest. And he may want to stay home and monitor that. I don't know how much monitoring he's going to be doing. And I guess that was the point of the morning post for the show today. I'm curious how he treats hurricane prep. I think he is sensitive to having been criticized over the last several hurricanes and his response to them. So I guess he thinks he needs to put on a public show of staying around and monitoring things. But I know, he gets bored and he gets upset when he doesn't get to play golf. And I'm sure that he could, in his own mind, justify playing a little golf, particularly if he stayed in Washington and played at the Virginia course. We should be having nice weather this weekend, so he'll be able to get a couple, or a round or two in, and he'll be able to say, I'm still basically here in Washington. I'm in communication with the weather. I think we were only reading something the other day that he referred to things that way. I'm talking to the weather. Meaning, I guess, the people monitoring the weather for me. And I guess he could probably get away with it, and apologists wouldn't have to bend over backwards to say he's on the job if he's playing golf in Virginia. If he goes to New Jersey, which I think is his preferred summertime destination, I don't think he gets the benefit of any better weather or anything. Plus, it costs more money, and he likes that. And I think he likes Bedminster better in general. And it is Labor Day weekend, so he might have been planning on, well, I guess he wasn't planning on being there. He was planning on being in Poland, which is, I don't know how he let that slip. I mean, I guess he doesn't celebrate Labor Day per se, but usually, a big holiday weekend, they like to do everybody likes to do their thing. So he would, I don't know. I guess if he enjoyed getting his family together, he would do that in Bedminster. But instead, I bet my guess is he sticks around Washington and maybe doesn't even play golf at all. He might stay in and monitor things. Usually that drives him kind of crazy. He doesn't like that. Plus, of course, he doesn't really care about monitoring the hurricane. There's nothing he really wants to do with it. He just, I guess, wants to be seen as being briefed on something. And now, people might have thought, well, he's extra concerned because, of course, his properties could be in line for some damage there. Not only is there Pervalago in Palm Beach, but there's the Doral, the already troubled Doral Golf Resort down closer to Miami. He's also there's another golf club. The place he plays golf when he's at Mar-a-Lago is in Jupiter, Florida, I think, right? I think that's correct. And there may even be another golf course right around there that he owns, and he rotates between the two of them. So, there's a considerable number of properties up there that are likely to sustain some damage. But I think he's excited about it. I think he views it as an opportunity. My guess is he's going to steal so much hurricane relief money from FEMA in this storm. And he'll have all sorts of excuses for doing it. Normally, it's kind of exciting for him because he's going to get the opportunity to do that, either stealing money from the government, or his second favorite thing is to claim major damage and go after the insurance companies for the money. And, it's all documented. We've read the stories before. People were reminding me of their various sources on it on Twitter today, how much money he claimed. Boy, it's really killing me today. How much money he claimed in damages to Mar-a-Lago way back when. I think when one of the kids was getting married there a couple weeks after one of the big famous storms, and he claimed something like $17 million in damage had been done, and no damage had been done. That's his thing. Whenever there's a pot of money out there for victims, he loves to stick his hands in there and steal it. And this time he'll have the excuse of saying, well, Pervalago has to be in tip-top shape because the president, who is me, goes there all the time, and we have all sorts of fancy and important meetings, and there's national security stuff, and there's now all kinds of expensive equipment there because I pretend I'm the president and I want to be there, and presidents get expensive stuff. That's why I ran for the job. And it all got broken and wet, so it all needs to be replaced. And I'll replace it. Just give me the check and I'll go buy the things. And of course, Doral now that's the site of the G7 meeting next year. We got to have that in tip-top shape. And, Jupiter, the president plays golf there, and you got to be able to launch nuclear weapons from the golf course. So it needs $400 billion in renovations because one of the greens is flooded. So I'm sure he views this as a huge opportunity, and he would have viewed it as a huge opportunity to steal FEMA money anyway, even if he wasn't the president. The fact that he is president means that he can, in his mind anyway, order people to sign the documentation that makes it, quote unquote, legal for FEMA to pay $400 billion to Pervalago and Doral for repairs because national security, et cetera, et cetera. We give our president too much power in this country, and we just weren't expecting somebody as obviously and openly corrupt as this. But now we've got him, and we got some repair work to do. Okay, speaking of the G7, maybe we can transition this way. Oh, you know what? Before I transition, I also put aside another of Bill's tweets, and it didn't even have anything to do with the show, but I thought a good point made. I didn't know. This is the theme of the show is theme of every show is stuff I didn't know before and need to read an article about. And today, no different. But for some reason, we're more overt about that theme. That I didn't know this. Bill tweeted yesterday, did anyone else know that FEMA Director Brock Long, man, your FEMA Director porn name is, I don't know. Well, it's Brock Long. That's it. There's no game to it. What's your porn name? Brock Long. Why? Because that's your name. That's it. Everybody is going to be Brock Long. Did anyone know that FEMA Director Brock Long quit in March? I didn't. How did you know, Bill? He didn't even last 2 years. We've had an acting director. That's right. What kind of director?
Acting!
Acting director. Yes.
Acting! Brilliant!
That's all brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for being the acting director of FEMA. The new guy in charge is, and Bill looks at the FEMA site bio here, just to be sure he has the facts straight, 6 raccoons standing on each other's shoulders under a business suit. Good. I'm glad. It's not like there's any major hurricanes headed for... Oh, there is. I missed Brock Long quitting. And as I recall, wasn't he the guy... He stepped in and he was like, I'm going to do the job from wherever he was from, like Western North Carolina, right? And commute to Washington as necessary. And he quit. He's gone. I didn't even know it. I missed it entirely because he was so super important. And now we have an FEMA director, and I don't know who it is. And Bill might, but I don't, and he didn't put it in there. And man, that's pretty amazing. We're in bad shape in this country. Okay, the other story I was going to turn to, we're going to jump off of the Doral G7 thing back to the most recent G7 meeting in France and say that U.S. spies say Trump's G7 performance, and all things are performance for him, suggests he's either a, quote, Russian asset or a, quote, useful idiot for Putin. And so many things suggest that that's the case. But this time it is Business Insider writer, Sonam Sheth, who says so. And I am willing to say I'm open to agreeing to that at the outset. All right. Why do they say this? Before we get to the article, there are a large number of bullet points under the heading analysis. My guess is that if you read these things, you won't have to read the whole article. And that if you do read those things and then you read the whole article, you'll say, I'm repeating myself. So what's best? The analysis, and I'm afraid we'll miss something. I'm curious now to see what would happen. Anyway, we'll read the article, because, is that the right choice? Would we be done faster if we just read the bullet? Let's experiment and read the bullet points. Analysis. Current and former spies are floored by President Donald Trump's fervent defense of Russia at this year's G7 summit in France. And where was it in France? How do you say the name of the place? I didn't listen to enough news reports to get that pronunciation. Biarritz, B-I-A-R-R-I-T-Z. Very famous. And if I were a ritzy and snazzy enough person, I would know that. And I wonder if Ritz comes from the actual name of the town. I have no idea. It's hard to see the bar anymore since it's been pushed so far down the last few years, but President Trump's behavior over the weekend was a new low, one FBI agent who works in counterintelligence told Insider, that's Business Insider. At the summit, Trump aggressively lobbied for Russia to be readmitted to the G7, refused to hold it accountable for violating international law, blamed former President Barack Obama for Russia's annexation of Crimea, and expressed sympathy for Russian President Vladimir Putin. One former senior Justice Department official who worked closely with the former special counsel Robert Mueller when he was the FBI director told Insider Trump's behavior was, quote, directly out of the Putin playbook. We have a Russian asset sitting in the Oval Office. A former CIA operative told Insider the evidence is overwhelming. That's a quote, overwhelming, that Trump is a Russian agent. But another CIA and NSA veteran said it was more likely Trump was currying favor with Putin for future business deals. So the intelligence community is split as to whether he is simply a Russian agent or is looking to get a big payoff later, or could be both. Meanwhile, a recently retired FBI special agent told Insider that Trump's freewheeling and often unfounded statements make it more likely that he's a useful idiot. And that's the quote, useful idiot for the Russians. But, quote, it would not surprise me in the least if the Russians had at least one asset in Trump's inner circle. End quote. Okay. So, it seems to me like in a quick scan of the article body that we don't get that much. That's the essence of things, and a lot of it would be repeated. But there's, I guess, some supporting prose around it, and I guess putting names to those assessments is the majority of the body of the article. Okay, maybe I should take a look down here at this bottom here. A familiar pattern emerges. Trump's defense of Putin at the G7 summit didn't go unnoticed in Russia. According to the Washington Post, one show on the state-run Rossiya 1 network played a celebratory soundtrack as it showed 6 video clips of Trump demanding that Putin be given a seat at the table. The Russian media analyst Julia Davis said, we've read her tweets before, said that Kremlin-controlled media reacted to Trump's G7 performance with laughter and mockery. That's good. One anchor rejoiced that, quote, Trump is dancing to Putin's tune, unquote, while others were amused by the, quote, maniacal persistence, unquote, with which Trump was lobbying for Russia. This isn't the first time the president has been accused of working to advance Russia's interests ahead of the U.S.'s. Perhaps the sharpest example of this was when Trump and Putin held a bilateral summit in Helsinki last year. I'm pretty sure we have that right, Helsinki. After the meeting, Trump stunned the U.S. national security apparatus and foreign allies when he sided with Russia over U.S. intelligence community, blaming both sides, yay, for the deterioration of U.S.-Russia relations and praised Putin as being extremely strong and powerful. Wow. In 2017, Trump refused to accept the U.S. intelligence community finding that Moscow meddled in the 2016 race to propel Trump to the presidency. That May, he fired FBI Director James Comey, back in the news again, right, who was overseeing the FBI's investigation into Russia's election interference and cited, quote, this Russia thing as the reason. 2 days after firing Comey, you know all about this, Trump shared classified intelligence with 2 Russian officials in the Oval Office and told them firing Comey had taken great pressure off him. Shortly after, the FBI began investigating whether Trump was a Russian agent. Yeah, well, seems like, he is, basically. Okay. They have a story about the personal assistant being fired, too, here at Business Insider, but I don't know if it's going to have any more information or detail, although they did the whole analysis bullet point thing for this story too. Yeah, no, nothing extra in that one. All right, so lesson learned. You could probably save time on if the story is not a top priority, by reading the analysis bullet points in Business Insider. Okay. On the oversight front, I thought I would share this story. This one from Politico as well. Brian Fowler, F-A-L-L, just one L, F-A-L-E-R. Failer. I'm sorry to say that. That reads to me like your name is Failer. But we'll say, he probably goes with Fowler on that one. I really don't know. Judge rejects Democrats' bid to speed lawsuit for Trump's tax returns. That gets a sad trombone for sure. Yeah, you're not getting your oversight, which I hate to, I hate that we're right about this all the time, but the oversight thing, not really cutting it. Okay, a federal judge on Thursday rejected House Democrats' bid for a quick consideration of their lawsuit seeking President Donald Trump's tax returns. So the judge is, as I recall, he's a Trump appointee. And I think we mentioned this story before the judge ruled, maybe, last week, perhaps the week before, that we were stuck in this holding pattern waiting for a judge to decide whether or not that he would move this in expedited fashion or whether we would go straight to some appeals and all of this stuff. And look, it happens to be coming out the opposite of what Democrats would need to get a hold of this thing. And if it's like facially absurd because, once again, the law was pretty black and white. The House Ways and Means chairman has the right to obtain the tax returns from the IRS, just that there was nothing in the law that said, what if the IRS, either on its own or at the direction of the Treasury Secretary, simply refused to give you what you're demanding? Well, that we'd have to adjudicate. And I guess whenever you do that, and whenever you do that before a Trump judge, or any other really, whenever there's Trump lawyers involved, you're going to have to sift through and give at least lip service to the absurd claim that, no, the whole thing is wrong and it's illegal and unconstitutional to even have that law, and also something national security. So now we have to wade through all of that, and guess what? It's not coming out well. D.C. District Court Judge Trevor McFadden denied their request, the Dems, that is. Of course, again, we probably should point out that this is the House Ways and Means Committee. It happens to be controlled by Democrats, but it is an official body. So they denied the request of the Ways and Means Committee, really, to both expedite consideration of the case and to decide on its merits without holding a trial, which is a reasonable thing to ask because the law says what it says. But it's not to be. This is no ordinary case, but the weighty constitutional issues and political ramifications it presents militate in favor of caution and deliberation, not haste, McFadden said, or a clerk said for him. This case presents novel and complex questions about the privileges and authority of all three branches of the federal government. House Ways and Means Chairman Richard Neal of Massachusetts is suing for Trump's federal returns under a 1924 law allowing the heads of Congress's tax committees to examine anyone's personal tax records. The Democrats, really the committee, is seeking 6 years of Trump's personal returns and some of his business filings. Trump has steadfastly refused to release the information, defying a decades-old tradition of presidents voluntarily disclosing their returns. In seeking speedy consideration of the case, well, again, they say Democrats noted that the current session of Congress will end in 16 months. Can you imagine? They're finally aware of this. They had proposed a court briefing schedule that would end by October 25th with oral arguments to follow. Trump lawyer William Consovoy opposed that proposal. In the order released this evening, that would have been, I think, yesterday evening, McFadden, who was appointed to the district court by Trump, suggested Democrats were slow to ask for expedited consideration, saying the request came 7 weeks after they first filed suit. More foot dragging, used as an excuse this time to beat you over your own head, you morons. The court does not fault the committee. Again, now we're talking about the committee, The court does not fault the committee for its time and efforts negotiating with the administration before suing, but it is not clear why only now the committee asked for expedited consideration, he wrote. It is clear. They feel they're running out of time. You just don't care that they're running out of time. You want them to run out of time. McFadden also noted that there are other suits in which Democrats are demanding information about Trump's finances, including one involving Deutsche Bank. We heard about that one yesterday, which has lent the president hundreds of millions of dollars over his career, and the accounting firm Mazars. That related issues are percolating in other courts, particularly before the D.C. Circuit, suggests that a rush to judgment here would be unwise. It really doesn't. He said, it may be appropriate to expedite this matter at some point, but not now. The case is separate from another suit in which Trump is suing to prevent Neal from tapping a recently passed New York law that would give him access to the president's state tax returns. That too, by the way, in court in New York at the moment, but I don't think Neal is actually requesting them. They're just suing to block New York from allowing him to do so. But I'm not sure about that. He may have gotten, panicked and asked for them from New York as well. It's also like we said, a separate issue from the lawsuit involving Deutsche Bank and Capital One. Don't forget them. And Mazars, some of which may turn up parts of Trump's tax returns. But the fact that there is another case which might involve disclosure by Deutsche Bank by way of discovery of certain documents that are in their possession which represent partial looks at his or other family members' tax returns, it really doesn't bear at all on the interpretation of this 1924 law that says the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee is entitled to receive the full works, all of the tax returns directly from the IRS that he requests. Period. End of sentence. I guess there's always room in constitutional law to look at whether or not, okay, the law says that, but should the law stand as constitutional? Or does it place some sort of unconstitutional burden on the president as he's sitting in office, etc.? You can always think about those things. There's no real reason to believe that that this case should be influenced in any way by the Deutsche Bank and Mazars case, quite honestly. So I think that's just the judge doing Trump a favor. Who would have guessed that would happen? All right. A few other interesting things that should be noted. Now, I do have this other story. Speaking of those other cases, this piece from... but this is from May. Okay, that's the wrong one. That's the old piece that got circulated briefly yesterday because the headline was exciting. Judge rules Deutsche Bank can hand over Trump financial records to Congress. That's actually from May, and that is under appeal at the moment, not actually the answer. So the answer that we're looking for would be coming from an appeals court panel of 3 judges, not this one judge at the moment, although they may remand it back to that one judge to make a final decision about those things. Okay, so we'll skip that one for now. Well, let's see. There's more. Let's go back to the G7 thing just before heading into break and read Mark Sumner's summation of what happened or what's happening more in general over issues swirling around Ukraine. Donald Trump is doing everything but putting a bow on Ukraine to prepare it for Putin. That's also going to bring us to another piece that I think I have had waiting in the wings from Politico, the slightly more detailed version of it. We'll see whether Mark alleviates our need to read the Politico piece. This was from Thursday, saying on Wednesday evening, so he's writing about the article from Politico, I think, that I was going to read, or at least coverage of the same issue. On Wednesday evening, the story was that Donald Trump was surprising everyone by his, quote, slow walking of defense funds for Ukraine. That is to say, the Congress had allocated funding for Ukraine, for the government and armed forces of Ukraine to purchase weapons to be able to stand up to their fight against pro-Russia separatists, Russian-backed separatists in Ukraine, or even, I guess, for that matter, the Russian military itself, if they were to, try to annex more of Ukraine, or just maybe they could even be, I don't even know whether it was specifically meant to undermine the Russian annexation of Crimea. But anyway, on Wednesday, the story was that everyone was surprised by his slow walking of defense funds for Ukraine. That changed on Thursday morning because the story now is that Trump is likely to block funding for the U.S. ally, Ukraine, entirely in his effort to serve up the former Soviet republic to Vladimir Putin on a silver platter. That's treason. Meanwhile, John Bolton has identified the biggest threat to Ukraine, a nation where Russian troops are occupying one region and conducting active warfare in others, as Chinese economic aggression. Okay, sure, why not? Thanks, John. And all this is happening as Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani is leaning on Ukrainian officials in an effort to generate a fake scandal for Joe Biden. CNN reports that Trump is, quote, heavily considering, and everything he does is done heavily, completely blocking $250 million worth of military assistance to Ukraine, which would, quote, further ingratiate him to Russian President Vladimir Putin, unquote. Considering the staggering need for this assistance in Ukraine, Trump's failure to follow through is a clear signal to U.S. allies that Trump doesn't have allies. He has personal relationships. Specifically, he has personal relationships with people who funneled millions into a military program to interfere in the U.S. election for his benefit and who are still keeping a square in Moscow warm for his inevitable tower. I don't think they're ever really going to pay him off on that. I don't know if I would go so far. To back Trump's play, Bolton was on Twitter Thursday morning to let it be known that he is absolutely there for Ukraine in the fight against their biggest problem, that problem being ensuring it is not subject to Chinese economic exploitation. Well, you have to watch every place in order to watch out for Chinese economic exploitation. That's true. That is their program. So, while Trump will not help Ukraine fight against the Russian troops already on its soil, Bolton will assist it in the fine art of conducting a trade war because that's gone so well for everyone so far. Not only is all of this undoubtedly calling for a fresh round of vodka-flavored champagne or champagne-flavored vodka at the Kremlin, but it's also coming as Rudy Giuliani has renewed his efforts to arm-twist Ukrainian officials into signing on to a conspiracy theory involving Joe Biden. Remember that one? This comes after the new president of Ukraine told Giuliani to take a hike, and the prosecutor who got a personal call from Trump admitted that he had made everything up. And if that's not enough corruption for one story, that's not all. There's more after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We're continuing on with Mark Sumner's piece from the other day about Donald Trump wrapping up the Ukraine, or failing to put a bow on it, though, but metaphorically doing so, certainly. We left off by pointing out that Rudy Giuliani, was back on the job trying to get the Ukrainian officials to to put out information that would help them implicate Joe Biden's son in a scheme to lobby on Ukraine's behalf and somehow pocket funding. I don't know whether it was, I can't even remember the details of the story of what they were trying to hang on him. But this puts Ukraine in a really interesting situation. In order to have their best shot at securing American aid in their fight to retain their sovereignty in the shadow of Russia's aggression, they might think they need to do whatever Trump asks of them. But I'm getting the sense that perhaps the newly elected Ukrainian president, and boy, have we read a lot about the various contenders for Ukrainian presidency and prime ministership over the last couple of days. I think he may realize, look, the reality of it here is that Trump is in Putin's pocket. He's not, there's no amount of begging we can do that will make him want to help us against Russia. So, while they're hinting that we might get this money if we suck up to them or do their bidding, the truth is either we won't get it or much more assistance, whether monetary or military in nature or not, even if it's just PR internationally. The Trump White House is signed up with the Kremlin agenda, not Ukraine's agenda. And there might be window dressing available to us if we do his bidding, but nothing serious. We're going to lose in this, so we might as well stand on principle. I think that's what they've concluded. All right, continuing with Mark's write-up of it, Giuliani has made it absolutely clear, if he's capable of doing so in any case, has made it absolutely clear that if any Ukrainian officials are willing to come forward and make any kind of allegation against Biden, Donald Trump will be very grateful. And that not coming up with at least an announcement that Biden is, quote, under investigation in a way that Trump could use in the upcoming election would be bad. Bad as in it would have a significant impact on Trump's willingness to follow through on the assistance that is supposed to be on its way. But I think they've figured out it's not on its way, so screw it. Rudy isn't the only one who has actually been shuttling to Kiev. Bolton is also on the ground there, but in his Wednesday meeting with Ukrainian officials, he seems to have spent exactly 0 time discussing the idea that Trump would actually block the funds that were supposed to be headed their way. All of this follows Trump's recent session at the G7, in which he didn't just suggest bringing Putin back into the organization, but also made it clear that he considered the annexation of Crimea a smart deal, in which Putin, and it wasn't a deal, it was an invasion, but okay, a smart deal in which Putin put one over on America and Europe. Trump always admires a good real estate deal, and apparently that includes the kind that involves invading tanks and helicopters. Whether Trump is blocking Ukraine's military funds because it makes Putin happy, or because it gives Giuliani more leverage to extract fictional claims about Biden, doesn't matter. It could be payment for 2016. It could be a down payment for 2020. It could get an upgraded lot in downtown Moscow. What it isn't doing is securing an allied state against invasion. It's a clear signal that Trump's vindictive, selfish egoism is the one and only basis of U.S. policy. Yeah, that about sums that up, I guess I'd say. The article I had originally put aside on this topic is also one from Politico. Let me just see if there's any additional info on this one. Caitlin Emma and Connor O'Brien, the writers on this piece entitled "Trump Holds Up Ukraine Military Aid Meant to Confront Russia." Just by way of background, in case it wasn't clear what happened there, we'll read through this. The Trump administration is, if it's the term, slow walking $250 million in military assistance to Ukraine, according to lawmakers and advocates who argue the funding is critical to keeping Russia at bay. This one brings, I think, into the story a little bit more about, well, the procedural problems here in the United States with standing in the way of clearing this money, and I guess constitutional issues as well. President Donald Trump, so-called President Donald Trump, asked his national security team to review the funding program known as the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative in order to ensure the money is being used in the best interest of the United States, a senior administration official told Politico on Wednesday. And here we hearken back to the story that we only hinted at. I think we read the title at one point. I don't know whether we went through the story, and we'll see whether it's still in Pocket or I archived it, considering it having been, handled by just saying it was out there. But somebody had pointed out that one of the big projects post-Trump, and really we should begin on this now, is taking stock of how many places our federal statutes allow for enormous latitude for the president, and that they were written back in the day when people thought, oh, the presidency is only occupied by serious people. And just the number of places where things can be done by, so long as the president certifies that it's necessary in some way. And laws that were written with the idea in mind that the president would consider things, soberly and seriously, even though we knew they would be doing it through a partisan lens. But that at least, even the most partisan of idiot presidents to that point, and I guess I'm thinking George W. Bush, would insist that they make some serious effort at putting forth an argument before he signed it as a presidential declaration, a presidential finding that X has happened, so therefore power Y exists. Whereas Donald Trump is just like, just say it in a document. I hereby declare, and I'll sign it. I don't care about, the underlying truth of it. And that's a problem because there's a lot of statutes out there sort of sitting dormant, a lot of power sitting dormant out there that he can claim that most people feel is wrong, is outside of his constitutional prerogatives, but which Congress has at one point or another ceded to the president so long as XYZ conditions are met, and he just declares them met. And when they wrote the statutes, I'm sure someone said, what if the president just declares them met? Well, he wouldn't do that because there's such thing as shame and consequences. Now that there aren't any, the president can do whatever he wants in many of these cases, thanks to these stupid laws. Okay, so keep that in mind as we read this. So he has, in other words, Putin says, hey, stop giving money to Ukraine because I'm invading them and I don't want to have to fight your money. And Trump says, all right, I'll go and do that. And then somebody says, oh, well, we have this problem. Congress has passed a law, and I guess you signed it, that says there's $250 million in military assistance going to Ukraine. Well, I think we should stop that. Oh, how can we? It's approved by Congress. Well, how about this? And I'm sure it's not his idea. Somebody says to him, well, Mr. President, if you ask your national security team to review the funding program to ensure that the money is being used in the best interest of the United States. Everybody wants that, right? Surely that's the point of this appropriation. Surely that's the point of American foreign policy in general, right? Now, presumably, it was approved by Congress after considerable deliberation because it was Congress's judgment that $250 million in military assistance to Ukraine was in the best interest of the United States. And it's law because the president signed that bill that appropriated that money. True, you can say, well, he might have signed it for various reasons and never really have felt like that particular item was in the best interest of the United States, but he doesn't have a line item veto, so he just had to swallow it. So now he gets to say, well, let's review that money to see if it's in the best interest of the United States, and that causes a constitutional problem. Well, you don't really have that opportunity. What do you mean? That chance to review it and decide whether it was in the best interest of the United States came at the signature time. You could have vetoed it if you didn't think that was the case. You're a little late. But surely there's room for review to make sure that the best interests of the United States are being represented, right? That's an argument we can make to court, and so they will. And if they get the right judge, guess what? You know what? Appropriations are subject to subsequent review. Go for it. There may even be a statute that says it is, if the president certifies that he absolutely has to make that review because reasons. Oh, well, I'll sign that. Yeah, it'll get what I want? Sure, let's do it. All right, back to the story. The delays come amid questions over Trump's approach to Russia after a weekend in which the president repeatedly seemed to downplay Moscow's military intervention in Ukraine and pushed for Russia to be reinstated into the Group of Seven. The review is also occurring amid a broader internal debate over whether to halt or cut billions of dollars in foreign aid in general. The United States military aid to Ukraine has long been seen as a litmus test for how strongly the American government is pushing back against Moscow. So I guess it's gone now. The Trump administration in 2017 approved lethal arms sales to Ukraine, taking a step the Obama administration had never done. And I guess leading to the president saying, I'm tougher on Russia than anybody, including Obama. The question is, did that stuff get there? So remember, they were claiming how tough he was on Russia. I'm giving lethal arms to Ukraine in the face of a possible Russian invasion. How could you say I'm not tough on Russia? The move was seen as a sign that Trump's government was taking a hardline approach to a revanchist Vladimir Putin, despite the president's public rhetoric flattering the Russian leader. Scaling back that assistance could expose Trump to allegations that his policies are favoring Moscow. For the 2019 fiscal year, lawmakers allocated $250 million in security aid to Ukraine, including money for weapons, training, equipment, and intelligence support. Specifically, Congress set aside $50 million for weaponry. Now, that funding is being called into question. The senior administration official, who asked to remain anonymous, said the president wants to ensure U.S. interests are being prioritized when it comes to foreign assistance and is seeking assurances that other countries are, quote, paying their fair share. Now, that's something he does with NATO all the time, right? NATO, they have to pay their fair share. Although he does do it with non-NATO countries, too. Japan, we're paying millions, billions, gazillions to defend them. They should be paying. Well, Ukraine, what's Ukraine's fair share in that, one, they're a fairly new country. They're not in NATO, so they're not obligated to make some certain expenditure. We have I don't know. Do we have any sort of bilateral agreement with them about that sets out the parameters of who pays for what? I doubt it. But that's the idea now. They're in need of $250 million of assistance from us. And Trump says, well, but they're not paying their fair share. I know. They can't. They can't pay for their own fair share of their own defense. We're doing it for them. Well, why should we? Well, because, we don't want them to be invaded by Russia. But we do want them to be invaded by Russia. Oh, well, that's a different story. So anyway, he knows that rhetoric has worked with his base with respect to other countries. The fact that it doesn't make any sense whatsoever in the context of Ukraine doesn't matter. They don't know that, and neither does he. Defense Secretary Mark Esper and National Security Advisor John Bolton are among the officials who were asked to review the Ukraine security funding, and they're geniuses, so it's going to go well. A senior Defense Department official told Politico that, quote, the department has reviewed the foreign assistance package and supports it. So that's it, right? No. The White House explanation that Trump wants to ensure the money is being spent properly isn't sitting well with lawmakers on Capitol Hill, where members of both parties have pushed to increase military assistance to Ukraine and U.S. military efforts to deter Russia in Eastern Europe. It's sort of a tradition for us. There is an at least temporary effect, said Representative Tom Malinowski, a New Jersey Democrat who sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. The bigger problem is that Trump is once again showing himself to be an asset to Russia. Senator Bob Menendez, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, vowed that the administration's move, quote, will be met with fierce opposition in Congress. Enough is enough, he said in a statement. President Trump should stop worrying about disappointing Vladimir Putin and stand up for U.S. national security priorities. The funds for Ukraine can't be spent. This is the great procedural stuff. They can't be spent while they're under review. You're under audit, so I can't. I'm sorry. While they're under review, and the money expires at the September 30th end of the fiscal year. Now, the account was originally created by defense policy legislation enacted in 2015. They've been waiting all this time for this money to help Ukraine battle pro-Russian separatists in Crimea after Moscow annexed the region in 2014. We were aware of an Office of Management and Budget hold on the funding for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, House Appropriations Committee spokesperson Evan Hollander said in a statement. We are aware of it. We have serious concerns about a freeze on these important appropriated funds, and we are urgently inquiring with the administration about why they are holding up these resources. And they just say, because we're studying them. The House Armed Services Committee is aware of the restriction, and they say, but they have requested additional information about what it means and is applied to, an aide told Politico. In other words, they're running around with no clue. In a Politico op-ed in April, Senate Armed Services Chairman Jim Inhofe, the Republican senator from Oklahoma, called for boosting federal funding for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative and argued that a bigger portion of the money should go to support defensive lethal aid that will make Ukraine a more difficult target for Putin's aggression. Trump is scheduled to meet this weekend in Warsaw, Poland, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. But guess what? He's not going to Warsaw, Poland. Pence is. So I guess that's not happening either. And that's another good reason why. Good for him reason why. Another explanation for why he canceled the trip. The Trump administration's broader push to freeze or slash foreign aid that White House officials contend is wasteful has sparked intense bipartisan backlash, with lawmakers warning of a deteriorating relationship with the White House when it comes to the use of appropriated funds. Sort of a constitutional battle again, like completely constitutional. The administration dropped a plan last week amid congressional fury that would have cut more than $4 billion across 10 areas of foreign assistance, including funds for international peacekeeping operations, narcotics control, and global health efforts, because screw all of that. The administration also backed off a similar plan last year. Representative Hal Rogers of Kentucky, Republican, ranking member of the House committee that oversees funding for the State Department, and Senator Lindsey Graham, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations and Appropriations Committees, both warned Trump, no, I'm warning you, against the package of funding cuts. Top Republicans and Democrats on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and Senate Foreign Relations Committee also sounded the alarm. Daniel Freed, I'm guessing not Fried, but Freed, a career diplomat who has served in both Republican and Democratic administrations and was most recently the State Department coordinator for sanctions policy. Sounds like an important guy, right? He said, the review sends the wrong message to a Democratic ally under intense pressure from Moscow's aggressive behavior. If the administration has a good reason for a sudden cut to security assistance to Ukraine, they should share it, Freed told Politico. Ukraine's new leaders, in office through free and fair elections, thankfully, at last, have earned and deserve America's support, not mixed signals. Trump has also withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to Central America, and sought to shuffle around federal dollars in order to bolster Trump's immigration enforcement priorities. For example, the administration's plans to divert $271 million from various Department of Homeland Security accounts, including $155 million in federal disaster aid, when might we need that, to beef up funding for its immigration and enforcement effort, the wall. It is of great concern that during the course of this administration there has been a growing disconnect between the will of Congress and the department's immigration enforcement proceedings, which often lack justification. Representative Lucille Roybal Allard of California, who chairs the House subcommittee that funds DHS, said in a recent letter to acting Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McClellan, and I'm sorry I just missed the
Acting
Homeland Security Secretary. Yes, that's true. In a statement on Wednesday, FEMA spokesperson said the move won't affect long-term recovery efforts underway in states and territories ravaged by hurricanes, wildfires, and flooding. Of course it will, and that speaks nothing of what the effect might be on immediate short-term recovery efforts like starting tomorrow we might need in Florida, but it will probably destroy everything. But more importantly, the situation in Ukraine, interesting, convoluted, deteriorating, serious, and carrying serious constitutional implications here at home. The president just basically exercising what amounts to line item vetoes by fiat because, there's loopholes in the law. Well, what if, can the president after the fact say, don't spend that money, you're not allowed to? No, not if he does so in the form of saying, I hereby line item veto that spending. Can he block the spending of appropriated funds and put a hold on them on his say-so? Well, apparently, some people think he can, on his say-so, and do so through the end of the fiscal year so that the funding expires and never gets spent. And isn't that the equivalent of a line item veto? Yeah, but you'll have to take him to court in order to determine that. And half the judges are just going to give him a break anyway because MAGA. So we got an important cleanup job to handle in the next couple of years. All right, let me see if I can find, by way of summing up, I'll take a quick look through Pocket and see if I can't find that one mention I had set aside of the work that we have cut out for us. I mean, it's a while ago now, and I hope I kept it, but I'm not certain that I did, and if I did, whether I mentioned it earlier and ended up archiving it. But yeah, somebody several days ago, and it'll be in my Twitter feed, but it's probably like a week old now. But somebody was making a great argument for that. That really, brought those thoughts together coherently in an argument about what we really needed to do to fix things after this administration, or even really during the course of this administration. All right, well, I don't find it immediately, but you get the thrust of the thought here. But that's something really we're going to need to work on in much more organized form and try to catalog. I mean, it might be impossible to catalog the number of places where the president, a real president, would have considerable leeway in ignoring the dictates of law through a loophole that requires that he make a serious effort to document and establish that there's some major national security principle at stake. But it doesn't set a floor. Essentially, the real problem is it doesn't set any sort of minimum standard for what needs to be proved. It simply needs to be declared. Ordinarily, no president wants to put their name to such a declaration without at least an attempt at laying out a serious argument, even if it ends up being, groundless in court. But this one doesn't like paperwork. And so they don't even bother to assign the work to some low-level functionary. Write me up something that sounds like legal mumbo-jumbo and I'll sign it. They just throw it together in the White House. And Stephen Miller, frequently enough, just prepares that material himself and says, sign this. And so whatever I say goes as law because I have the president's stupid, overgrown grandpa ear on this thing. And all things, and I can exploit that to be shadow president. All right, let me get to a few other items. We do have another break coming up, and maybe that'll give me a chance to search out that statement or article, if there was one accompanying it, and sum up that way. But here's a couple of short hits I can give you. For instance, I do have the Twitter comment of our old pal Jesse Lee, who points out this very interesting tidbit. Trump tweeting about Brazilian President Bolsonaro. And, of course, the fires in the Amazon very much on everyone's mind. And does what Trump say have anything to do with this? I guess so. The Trump's tweet here is, I've gotten to know President Bolsonaro well in our dealings with Brazil. He's working very hard. On the Amazon fires and in all respects doing a great job for the people of Brazil, blah, blah, it's a garbage tweet. But Jesse pointing something out here, it says, I know everybody on the right loves that Bolsonaro is burning down the Amazon and accelerating human extinction to own the libs or whatever. And that's basically their position on this thing. But great point here. He's actually burning them down. Why is he burning down the Amazon? It's not just to own the libs. Right? I mean, although that seems to be justification enough for these days for, alt-right wacko types like the president of Brazil, unfortunately, and the president of the United States, even more unfortunately. But there's more to it. It's not that he's burning it down to own the libs. He's actually burning them down to clear the land, to plant soybeans with the idea in mind that he can steal the Chinese market, to which we can no longer sell our soybeans, and put our farmers out of business forever. Hashtag MAGA. Think about that, right? So as the right cheerleads the destruction of the Amazon forest because they know that makes liberals sad because it's going to kill the planet. The reality is that, of course, once again, they are backhandedly helping enemies screw Americans to death. In this case, soybean farmers who have lost their lost all access to the Chinese market, which was sustaining them because of the stupid trade war, which is good and easy to win, but which we're losing daily. So now the Chinese need their soybeans from somewhere. Bolsonaro sees a fantastic opportunity. The Chinese need soybeans, period. And I guess they can't grow enough for themselves. They used to buy whatever they could off of the Americans, and it was a very lucrative market. How can we get that market for ourselves? Well, First, the Americans have gone ahead and shot themselves in the foot, and we should, at every opportunity, encourage the president not only to keep shooting himself, shooting the farmers in the foot, but not to do anything to stanch the bleeding. Keep it up. Your trade war is great. You're winning. It's good and easy to win. But in the meantime, they have to have soybeans. Why don't we grow those soybeans? Well, we could, but where? We need land to do it. I mean, we have land. It's not like Brazil's lacking in land, but the crops or plant something else is planted in that space. I got an idea. How about we burn down the rainforest and plant soybeans there, and then all of a sudden we'll become rich in soy sales. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think really that there's just no way I'm going to be able to wade far enough back into my tweet stream within the confines of the show to find the tweet I was thinking of. I think maybe I ended up not bookmarking it or not putting it in Pocket because there was no prepared written piece that went along with the observation. But, yeah, I mean, I think they were just making the point, maybe it was an article that needed to be written that would catalog all of the places, or at least some number of the places where the president, or the acting president, at least of the United States, would have the ability to, essentially would have all the appearances of suspending law on his say-so. Because he wanted it to happen that way, because the Congress had previously granted presidents in general that authority. There it is. I did find it. Presidents the authority to do so on the assumption that they would take that seriously and only do it when they thought they could justify it. And I did find it, and I think I had even had the right person in mind. Steve Vladeck, professor at University of Texas Law School, who, so maybe I mentioned it the other day and maybe not, and I wish there was an article attached to it. There really isn't. But he's tweeting in response to a Trump tweet, which was from August 23rd, and reads, "For all of the fake news reporters that don't have a clue as to what the law is relative to presidential powers, China, etc." This was, of course, after he said, "I hereby order everybody to stop doing business with China," right? And everybody was like, the president can't just do that, especially not in a tweet. "I hereby order you to stop doing business with China." And his answer to that was, well, you really don't know what the law is. In fact, he says, "For all the fake news reporters that don't have a clue as to what the law is relative to presidential powers, China, etc., try looking at the Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. Huh? Case closed," he says. So somebody in the office told him that, that there was such a law. And he said, "Oh, really? Okay. Well, what's that called again? Dan, you type this thing in here. Tell him, you type the thing in. I don't know what's going on here." So that's how the tweet comes out. "Oh, yeah? The Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 says I can hereby order," something like that. And, it gives people pause. Wow, maybe he has a point. I've never heard of the Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. I certainly don't remember hearing about it at any point. And lo and behold, I mean, some of these things you can open up the books and find out, well, on certification by the president that XYZ has happened, he may be able to suspend trade powers or suspend trade operations, even of private businesses, upon a declaration that it serves an overriding national security interest. And again, ordinarily a president would then say, well, what exactly would it be? I'm having trouble coming up with one that doesn't make me look like a moron. The president says, I already look like a moron. What the hell do I care? Just declare it. I'll sign it and that'll be done. So Steve Vladeck commenting here, one of the enduring phenomena of the Trump era is going to be the list of statutes that give far too much power to the president, but that many didn't used to worry about, assuming there'd be political safeguards. Today's entrant, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And I think I probably read you that tweet. I was just hoping that there was some follow-up article about that. And I don't see one yet, although maybe I should keep an eye on Vladeck's Twitter feed in order to find out about it. There's an interesting comment afterwards who says, who is the person in his administration that is finding all these powers? He's too stupid to do it alone. That's who you should be worried about. No, most administrations, it's not the president that comes up with that stuff. Even in the Barack Obama administration, I'm fairly sure that he wouldn't have said, oh, wait, Economic Powers Act of 1977. And you have people for that. But the thing that was so interesting about the Trump administration for a while anyway was that it was devoid of people with those skills. They didn't have anybody who knew where the bodies were buried, as they say in Washington, D.C., or know how to pull the levers of power the way, say, like a Dick Cheney did. But I guess they've either acquired them or maybe stumbled upon them, or it might be that it's just bad ad hoc, off-the-cuff research, and they Googled some terms and they mistakenly believe that the Economic Powers Act of 1977 enables them to do this thing, and it really doesn't. They just misread things. I think that's certainly a possibility as well. But some good comments in this thread afterwards. Somebody else saying here, a lot of the emergency powers from the 1970s were enacted with the thought of possible nuclear war in mind, in which case Congress might not be able to immediately act. Many of these things will need to be reined in. That's very true. And a good point as well. So now I'm just curious to see how active has Steve Vladeck been in the days since then. Has he come up with any more, or does he intend to write a catalog of such laws? Or, I wish he had a hashtag so we could read how many more there are out there. Okay. Well, anyway, I guess he's actually more concerned about what is the subject of his latest piece that I see published here in The Economist. Donald Trump has run to SCOTUS for emergency relief 21 times in 30 months. That's compared to 8 requests during the 192 months of the George W. Bush and Barack Obama administrations. This is an article by Stephen Mazie, or Mazie, M-A-Z-I-E, along with Vladeck in The Economist. So, emergency powers statutes, not the only place where he's seeking to govern by emergency. His emergency relief from the SCOTUS, and I wonder if he ever, or if maybe Stephen Miller ever put anybody specifically to the task of find me emergency powers, because that would be a really ingenious way of approaching it. It's not ad hoc in the sense of, I want to do X, can you find me justification for it? But like almost a proactive approach of, I know there's this aspect of the law out there, and I know how often, having served as a congressional aide for some time in the Senate, how often the Congress falls back on that. We want something to be done. We have an end in mind. And we occasionally run into legal restrictions and constitutional restrictions in getting to that end. And so we have a few crutches that we lean on frequently. Like, for instance, I've mentioned on the show a number of times that when they want to rush a bill through, but they know that there are legal obstacles out there and previously existing statutes that might negate or undermine some part of what they're trying to do, they throw in notwithstanding any other provision of law as a piece of boilerplate language that acknowledges, yes, we know that there's previously existing statute out there that might contradict what we're trying to do here. And either we know about it and are specifically addressing it, or we don't have time to find everything, or we're afraid we found 5, but we're afraid there might be 6, 7, and 8 out there, examples of places where this end would be undermined, and we haven't found them yet. So we summarily dismiss them by saying, notwithstanding any other provision of law, this now happens. And, their best case scenario on that is, in litigation, judges will see it and say, all right, well, it was clearly the intent of Congress to override anyway, as between in weighing the importance of these two statutes. This one was written with the idea in mind that we knew that there was contrary statute out there, but it was specifically going to be exempt from that statute, or, was meant to be read that way. Anyway, somebody who knows about something like that might also say, another thing we frequently do is when we debate the provisions of a new proposed law and say, well, I don't know if the president actually has the, or the department that we want to direct to do this actually has the power to do this. We want the, Department of Homeland Security to be able to confiscate rice cookers from brown people. Well, that has certain implications. Constitutionally, it could be a problem. Okay, well, what we need to do is, how about this? If the president certifies that as a matter of national security, brown people can't have rice cookers because they pose a unique danger to the United States and its national security and the welfare of its people. And in providing for the common defense, promoting the general welfare, and securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain that rice cookers should not be in the hands of brown people. They like to do things like that and cite the Declaration of Independence, which is not a governing document and it's not supposed to be cited that way. But if you think you're going to run into a constitutional problem, you can say, well, if the president certifies that there's an overriding national security need to take away rice cookers from brown people, then we'll allow it. Now, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's legal or constitutional to do so. There will be a lawsuit, I'm sure, by a plaintiff who loses their rice cooker, but let them work it out in court. And then at least they'll be examining the individual merits of the case, and some judges will allow the seizure of the rice cooker if prosecutors can come up with enough evidence that they are under the influence of international terrorists through the magic of the internet, for instance. And, if we just can't establish it at all, then fine, they'll get their rice cooker back and we'll arrest them for some other thing. We'll plant some drugs and child porn on them and arrest them for that. So good. We take care of things that way. Now, if someone were an evil genius or just an a-hole, like Stephen Miller is, knowing that and arriving in the White House, you might be able to say, what I would like is I want to do a search for, notwithstanding any other provisional law won't really help you very specifically, but I would love to do a search for statutes, let's say even limit it to statutes written in the last X number of years or whatever, that invoke some kind of phrasing of the sort that the president would have to certify something. That if any statutes that require presidential certification for the exercise of emergency powers, bring them to me, because those are places where we could probably find extraordinary powers to exercise to do the various things that we want to do that are clearly illegal or unconstitutional, and we could do a lot of them to brown people. That's my feeling. That's the sort of thing that I usually was seeing these provisions attached to. And as I recall from the debates, Democrats often raised objections that this could be used unfairly to target minorities. And we said, well, yeah, I mean, that's the idea of using it for targeting minorities, but we don't want to say that out loud at this stage of the game. But how about this? If the president certifies that there's a national security interest in doing it, nobody argues with national security, right? Well, at the time, Democrats didn't. They were worried about it and refused to do it. Okay, fine. If the president certifies that it's a matter of national security, then this particular brown person can lose their rice cooker, and we're good with it. But that kind of phrasing is splashed all over the law, and a really evil genius could say, find me all of those things, because we very frequently use those to cover up our targeting of brown people. And now I would like to use them all. I'm just curious about whether that's happening. It's just speculation, but it would be irresponsible not to give it to you, especially on a Friday. Okay. Now, what else can we do with our Friday? How about this? I'm going to go with this one. This seems like a good Friday story, and it looks long, and we might not finish it, and that's a tradition here on the show. I picked this one up from splinternews.com, saw it being tweeted about yesterday. Leaked emails show how white nationalists have infiltrated conservative media. I think we all suspected that was the case, but this is good documentation. And what's so very interesting about this to me also is, of course, this is a bunch of leaked emails. I also saw some reaction to it on Twitter from conservatives saying, oh, this is illegal, using leaked emails to target political something or other, or something, I don't know. So all they've discovered that this is a big problem now. But it also reminded me, well, we'll get to it. Maybe. If we get to the part that reminds me of it in the story, then I'll remind you. But if not, I'll keep you in suspense. Okay. Hannah Gais, Gais. I'm sorry, Hannah. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, and I probably should, but maybe no one will tell her. This is the story in Splinter News. Conservative institutions in the Donald Trump era have often sought to portray themselves as shocked and appalled by the so-called alt-right. White nationalists have also engaged in their own efforts to differentiate themselves from the neoconservatives who dominated the GOP for decades. But neither narrative is true. The reality is that a host of supposedly veritable right-wing institutions have become a safe haven for the far right. I think they mean venerable right-wing institutions, not veritable. Although maybe veritable it's a backhanded swipe at them, but okay. Indeed, there is a burgeoning underground network of group chats, message boards, and email chains serving as the breeding ground for incubating white nationalist ideas, including one inside the Department of Homeland Security and the Customs and Border Patrol, right? But this is different. Underground networks, blah, 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 group chats, etc., for incubating white nationalist ideas and as a forum to strategize around how to launder those ideas through mainstream conservative publications. And judging from a large series of messages from one of those email groups obtained by Splinter, it's working. These endeavors are often tactical in nature, as Paul Gottfried, a far-right political theorist, observed in the 2008 speech that is widely credited as birthing the term alternative right. Quote, we must try to do what is possible rather than what lies beyond our limited material resources, unquote. And I guess he used big words there to sound smart. But, I mean, what does that mean? I read that yesterday and said, what an insight. We should try to do what's possible instead of stuff that we can't do. That's the regular dumb person way of saying it. But we must try to do what is possible rather than what lies beyond our limited material resources. Typically, pseudo-intellectual alt-right stuff. This new right, Gottfried said, could only win by conquering the institutions that neoconservatives then dominated. It needed the institutions it sought to annihilate to thrive. Gottfried, who once told a journalist that he co-created the term alt-right with Richard Spencer, has since sought to distance himself from his former collaborator, though he has also mounted defenses of the overall movement on the far-right websites. I guess he saw Spencer getting punched all the time. Trump has emboldened the alt-right to seize upon once ostensibly staid conservative institutions for its own purposes. The term, which came to the attention of the mainstream around the 2016 presidential election, served as a means for internet-savvy white nationalists and white supremacists to downplay, or whitewash, you could say, their racist and anti-Semitic beliefs. It is used throughout this piece to refer largely to a specific clique with ties to the Washington, D.C. media and think tank scene. Campus conservative groups like Turning Point USA have been a target of both external coups and their own racist representatives who used them as a means to legitimize their beliefs. Figures such as Milo Yiannopoulos, remember him, the once beloved conservative commentator and far-right troll, found refuge in havens such as Breitbart, which, by the way, yes, should be getting thrown out of events left and right, and real journalists who defend them ought to be ashamed of themselves. In case you didn't guess my position on that one. Despite their prevailing view that much of the GOP constituted cuck-servatives, remember that? Numerous white nationalists have sought to use the party to propel them out of obscurity. And then there's the Daily Caller, the conservative publication co-founded by Tucker Carlson, who stepped down from his role as editor-in-chief in 2016. Even since the alt-right rose to prominence during the 2016 election, the site has been sucked into its own game of who goes Nazi. Since Trump's election, numerous Caller employees have come under fire for their semi-secret white nationalist affiliations. For example, Andrew Kerr, Kerr, an investigative reporter, yeah, right, for the Daily Caller News Foundation, was outed as having appeared on a number of programs with far-right conspiracy theorist Brittany Pettibone. Pettibone, wife of European white nationalist leader Martin Sellner, a man who recently sparked outrage for corresponding and accepting thousands of dollars in donations from the perpetrator of the Christchurch massacre, has branded herself as one of the most prominent, quote, experts of the Pizzagate conspiracy theory. Hey, I'm an expert in that too. In September of 2018, The Atlantic exposed former Caller editor Scott Greer, who wrote under the pseudonym Michael McGregor. Why? As the managing editor to Richard Spencer's white nationalist Radix, R-A-D-I-X, journal, using emails provided by former Breitbart editor and alt-right member Katie McHugh. McHugh also worked for the Caller, but has since publicly left the, quote, alt-right. I don't really know whether that's true or worth validating, although there's a linked article here. But, yeah, we may have taken note of that one back when it happened. Wow, she should see if she could use a little bit more makeup. Actually, she looks like she was glued together from magazine pictures, quite honestly. Okay, sorry, didn't mean to comment on her looks, but that's a bizarre picture. Can't help it. All right, still, the Caller has appeared to ignore what Southern Poverty Law Center referred to in 2017 as its white nationalist problem. The website quietly prevented one of its investigative reporters, yeah, right, from attending a conference at the H.L. Mencken Club, the same club associated with the birth of the term alt-right, in September 2018 after being contacted for comment by the SPLC. Several months later, the Caller's managing editor, David Brooks, not that one, was fired in the spring of 2019 for bragging about his own connections to the white nationalists. The links between these current and former Caller employees and the white nationalist movement have mostly been unearthed in pieces, but a trove of emails from a private white nationalist group chat, which were recently obtained by Splinter, sheds new light on those links. Among other things, the emails show how a former Caller employee named Jonah Bennett repeatedly used his perch at the site to launder far-right viewpoints into an ostensibly mainstream publication. How anybody ever thought the Caller was that, I do not know, but they did. They also show that he is part of a wider network of white nationalists who have steadily increased their influence within the conservative media infrastructure, most prominently a man named John Elliott. It's going to be a long, long article. But what's interesting to me also, now I'll throw this bit in, about this piece having been based on emails leaked from among a group chat, reminds me of, I guess, what their excuse is eventually going to be. But Journo List, those of you who have been around for a long time might remember that one, an email group of mostly, I think, left-ish leaning young journalists in the Washington, D.C. area, many of whom have become prominent in the years since. But it was a discussion group, essentially, but it was their emails were leaked, and the right wing essentially used this to accuse them of somehow colluding to give an even more leftward bent to mainstream news, which was fake news, et cetera, et cetera. It was sort of the beginning of the fake news thing before it was fake news. But just having been on Journal List was supposed to mean that you were somehow some outrageous leftist weirdo and could not be trusted to tell the truth about anything. It sort of developed that way because that's what the right wing needed out of it. Well, guess what? They have their own, and no one will remember Journal List and all of the assumptions that, by the way, they were fairly successful in getting actual mainstream traditional media to buy into the idea that people who were involved in Journal List were somehow less than. That won't happen here. And okay. And anyway, so their plan will continue unabated. Their plan, of course, being to use the rise of Donald Trump to help steer white nationalist viewpoints into the mainstream and say, we need to hire at our legitimate publication, which has worked hard to establish a reputation, some of these graduates of these obvious far-right, alt-right booster associations, essentially. And we can always use the excuse of, that's the guy who's president now, and we want somebody who understands that branch of conservative thought, which it isn't, to be writing and be part of our representative diversity here in our newsroom. Anyway, back to the story here. On the face of it, Jonah Bennett's career resembles that of a run-of-the-mill, up-and-coming conservative commentator. After being homeschooled for most of his life, he attended Simon Fraser University, a public research university in Canada. Bennett majored in political science, edited the journal for the university's Political Science Student Union, and won a number of awards for writing and scholarship. Shortly after graduating in 2014, he headed south to Washington, D.C., where he began his journalistic career at the Daily Caller that June. He was super young. I'm not sure he was even 21 yet. Jim Antle, the Caller's former managing editor, told Splinter in an email. Antle described Bennett as smart and nerdy, with a few close friends on staff, who wasn't a big personality by the standards of the office. The Daily Caller has long been one of the main starting points in media for it's not even that long, but last couple of years, I guess, starting points in the media for a certain type of conservative or libertarian journalist. Many reporters with a right-wing or libertarian bent got their start on the site, such as Catherine Watson of CBS, or Robbie Soave, how does he say? S-O-A-V-E. I bet he wishes it was Suave, of Reason. During his tenure, Bennett blogged, tried his hand at national security reporting, and snagged the occasional scoop. I knew he fancied himself a right-winger, Antle, who claimed not to know about Bennett's far-right tendencies, recalled in an email. But like Howard Johnson's ice cream, that comes in a variety of flavors. Good excuse. Bennett's preferred flavor was, as the collection of emails acquired by Splinter demonstrates, white nationalist. Vanilla, I guess. Very vanilla. Many of these emails, which are dated between late 2015 and 2018, came from a small private thread known as Morning Hate. And I'm sure they would tell you, that was just a joke. We were just kidding. The emails were provided by a source who passed them along on the condition of anonymity. Multiple sources confirmed their authenticity. Many of the people Splinter spoke to for this story were granted anonymity to be able to openly discuss the inner workings of the far right. Splinter also reached out to Bennett, Elliott, the Daily Caller, and others for comment on this story, and you can read their comments in a section near the end of this post, but you're going to have to read it on your own because we're almost out of time here, and we knew it would happen to us on a Friday, but I wanted to give you something to read for the weekend. In Morning Hate, Bennett and others were free to make their racist opinions known while laying the groundwork for leading their double lives of sorts in more mainstream conservative institutions, and of course hopefully leverage those into jobs in more mainstream, not so conservative institutions, like, I don't know, CBS. Anyway, the thread was steered in large part by Elliot, who at the time had recently left the job as director of the journalism program at the Libertarian Higher Education Focused Institute for Humane Studies. Elliot now works at the Minnesota-based Charlemagne Institute, which describes itself as an educational institution rooted in the Judeo-Christian Greco-Roman tradition. How do you like that? Which is working to defend and advance Western civilization because it's having such trouble advancing itself. The Institute also runs the conservative website Intellectual Takeout. Very interesting, and promises to be interesting reading for you over the weekend. Just wanted to make you aware of it to see if anything develops in the next coming weeks. And we'll probably continue with the reading of this and try naming names along the way just so that you have additions to the Rogues Gallery and can say you knew about that person when their story breaks wide. Okay, time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we'll have to determine what's going to happen over the weekend. I'll speak with Greg over it, see whether we're back on Monday or not, but we'll do our best to entertain you one way or another. Hope you have a great long weekend. We'll see you next time.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
There's big news that Justice has got for you on the tariff war. The great trade war is resulting in some anomalous results. Apparently, the administration considering some tax cuts to help Americans out with the damage done by those tariffs, which means even they know the Chinese aren't paying them.